Hey everyone, I'm Jeremy Szafron. This week on The Report, we speak with our buddy Bruce Linton. Now, him and I are going to go in depth for 20 minutes, so stick with us here. Bruce and I talk about Collective Growth, which is a new SPAC, a special acquisition corporation that he recently raised $150 million for and then IPO'd on the NASDAQ. Also, we talk about the industrial hemp revolution and what that all means, his new venture into the psychedelic space, which I should mention is having a moment right now because in a landmark decision, 4 Canadians suffering from terminal illnesses have been approved to receive psilocybin therapy to treat their anxiety. So hugely interesting news in that space too. But buckle up, enjoy, and hold on. Here's Bruce Linton.
Love it. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about CGROU. Let's talk about in the middle of this whole epidemic, as well as what's happening in the cannabis sector. You guys go to market, new IPO. Let's talk about the deal.
It's weird. Like everything you do, you need to have a reason to build the tool you're building. And so in Collective Growth, or CGRO or CGROW, if you want the warrant, OU if you want the unit, it's a special purpose acquisition company, which essentially means it's a blank check company, which means that you go out and explain what you might do. In our case, we wanted to assemble potentially a number of assets that turn tall industrial hemp, not the CBD stuff, not the marijuana stuff, this 21-foot tall stuff.
Right.
And the reason it doesn't fall over is on each, there's strands all the way up that for their diameter are stronger than if they were made out of steel. And so this 21-foot tall plant, which has a diameter of your thumb, doesn't fall over very often. Right. Now, if you take those strands out and a bunch of things, you can actually, historically, they were used to make the best ropes, the best sails, the best flags. Now they can be used to mix with carbon fiber to make really light, strong stuff. They can be twisted and turned into a conductive cord like copper, but lighter. And so there's all these potential industrial applications. And so what we were doing is we were saying to people, listen, it's a terrible time in the world. You can't go anywhere. Write us a check. And we're going to have to come back in sometime in the next 18 months with a game plan on what we're doing. And you have to agree, or you can have your money back.
Right. Interesting.
So in a sense, raising it during COVID was the easiest time ever because nobody could do any due diligence and make any real decisions except they still had cash to park. And I can't spend any of that cash until they say go, but I use money that we put up as our operating costs to look at stuff. So it's kind of like, if you stop and think about it, it's the easiest time to do it, just nobody else was doing it. So we're the only public listing that occurred in the week that we were doing it in the US exchanges, and therefore NASDAQ gave us a big fetting and all this stuff. Right. Now with currency, the reason I wanted to do it is, suppose you have a business and you're in Europe because it hadn't been federally illegal to make things out of hemp fiber in Europe, and you've been at it 25 years. That means you're probably about 60 something. When you're 60 something, what you don't want to hear is some dream on equity that might get listed.
Right.
You don't also need all your own cash back because you only want a certain amount of cash back, and then what the heck am I going to do with the rest? So by listing on the US stock exchange, I can make transactional deals with folks that might be 75% equity, 25% cash.
Interesting.
And then they end up with a really good currency, one which is a US dollar and the other is a US listed stock currency.
Right.
And so that allows us to actually have adult conversations with people who have something but need to find a way to transition it. And usually the reason they need to transition it is almost all entrepreneurs that have created something over the last 25 years have worked way too hard at it and their kids hate it.
Right.
And so even if some of them are working with it, they're not going to be the same craziness as mom or dad were. And so there's a whole process that goes through these guys. So that's kind of what it's about. And the reason we're doing it is the US until 2018 did not allow people to grow any level of hemp crops. And as soon as the starter pistol went off, everybody grew the wrong kind. Like if there were 1 million acres, maybe 999,000 were of short, stocky hemp plants designed purely for the amount of CBD they have in it.
Right.
And if they would have harvested and stored and used all the CBD, I think everybody could have like a cup of CBD a day in America. Just craziness. Stuff like cotton. We all got used to buying everything out of cotton because it's better than something else, but cotton is horrific for the planet, right? It doesn't actually grow without a ton of water applied and a lot of chemicals. And if you look at hemp, particularly the industrial hemp, it's about 3 times more absorptive of CO2 than any other field crop per acre, like 3 times quite a bit. And when maybe you want to turn it into paper. Well, 1 acre of a hemp crop produces about as much pulp as 1 acre of a forest, but it takes about 120 days to grow, not a whole bunch of years like a forest. And so as these things start to happen, and the really weird part is when they founded America, you know, this name Betsy Ross, she made the original flags.
Yeah.
At least one of them was made on hemp fabric.
Interesting.
And Mr. Henry Ford, he had a $10 bill that he'd commissioned the artwork on that showed a hemp field go flowing into a factory because he really loved hemp for cars.
Right,
Loved it for biofuel. He loved it for the componentry, everything from the carpets to the dashboards. He didn't even know about the conductive properties necessarily. Right. And so there was this really rich and known history. Like much of the paper in America was made this way, but then for a whole bunch of probably devious reasons.
And political and financial.
Well, devious, but like, you know, if you just are the DuPonts and you've invented nylon, you probably don't love hemp.
Right.
And so there's all these things that it just caused it to be forced away, and it was gone long enough that most people in the US didn't know that like that early flag was made out of it. So, and I give you that, and that I don't think it's going to be such a drama to return it to their landscape as it might be to initiate things like cannabis, which really never had the same stature and position as hemp did.
So a little bit of a sustainability and green impact as well within this. I mean, in terms of marketing it, that's where that's kind of going towards, right?
Yeah, like I had no idea how ecologically interested I was when I was in the cannabis business.
Right.
Until you stop and think about it, that almost every dollar of production cost equals spending on non-environmental things.
Yeah.
If you really, really want a super low production cost, you by default want to be the most efficient user of any inputs you can. So that's why we went from indoor grow to greenhouses. And then when we were permitted to actually start doing work on outdoor grow, well, of course you're in favor of it. Like that just means my cost base goes down. So like that's where smart environmentalists and smart business people will almost like to a level of frequency that would make them both bizarrely surprised, agree.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. You know, it's an interesting one too. You think about what you built even in terms of that, and to look at the outdoor grow here in Canada now. I mean, it's crazy.
Unbelievable. Yeah. It's unbelievable. More than half of the licensed grow is outdoor grow. And it was only 6 or 7 years ago when you had to basically have a person with a gun guarding a door attached to a humongous wall with a zillion kinds of air control systems and blah, 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 blah. Now, you got a field of the stuff.
Of course, yeah.
A little bit of a fence. No odor mitigation. And I'm not sure it was the smartest move. They might have jumped there too quick, but from a greenness perspective, it's a much better platform. And if all you're doing is monetizing milligrams,
right,
outdoor grow makes a ton of sense.
So how aggressive is the M&A strategy going forward? I mean, obviously you have a ton of institutional investors here. You got some family offices. You got probably some own skin in the game, I would imagine. Are you deploying this capital rapidly? Are you just aggressively going out?
So there's like with every, I call them an instrument or a tool. With everyone, there's rules.
Right.
It's just like getting in the cannabis business. I was alarmed, surprised, shocked. How many people who were trying to get licenses had not read the regulations? And I mean, really read them, like to the point where you had a tattered up copy of your own and you really knew like what was in them. And I say that because if you don't have that command of what the rules are, you may not optimize your execution. Right. And in the case of a SPAC, there's a bunch of rules. One of them is that the transaction you take to the shareholders for approval cannot use less than 80% of the value of the company. Now I don't have to use 80% of the cash. So if the company's worth 150 million bucks, I got to use 80% of that. Now it could be all stock if people really wanted it, or a mix, but that's usually not enough. So you have to do a bunch. So on an M&A basis, what we're trying to do is assemble a very interesting combination of things that should have a value that really exceeds that target, but also has the potential for terrific organic growth, subsequent growth, close the transaction, smash everything together in the next generation one, but leave it operating where they are. So then it should be a good thing to own because you get what you paid for and then you get more because it produces. That's sort of the logic. But apparently everybody else who does SPACs doesn't think that. What they do is they buy one big thing. Often they buy it and their plan is that that thing goes from being private to being public.
Right.
And the story is that because you're just so much smarter than the guys who were running before, you might make more money than they did. And I don't know about that one. So I like the idea of a few things together.
Interesting. We were talking about kind of utilizing the hemp and CBD industry into different markets. You think about in terms of consumer product goods, we got packaged goods, we got, these daily, people are still trying every day to get into somebody's daily routine.
I don't know if there's a daily use thing as much as like there's a multiple parts of your life.
Right.
So if the jeans you're wearing to work have a hemp component and the car you're driving has a hemp component, and maybe, if we had a division that had some food, maybe the flour that's in your waffle has hemp in it because that makes it more likely to stick with you through the day. You start going through that, and if the HDPE pressed out toothbrush you're using, so there's so many categories where this could land.
Yeah.
It might actually be more like it surrounds you rather than you pick the time of day each day you use it.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it can definitely be put into a variety of different sectors. Are you still involved with Virio? I know you're sitting. What are you doing with those guys? I know.
No, they took about $1 million of my money in with about 9 of my other friends who did also an investment. And I always thought that when companies and kind of the reason people call me to join their company isn't usually because it's going super terrific.
Yeah, of
they
course.
Call me and they're like, we want to go better. So my theory is that every company that's not going perfect needs to focus on 3 Ps. They need to focus on their plan because it's probably not yet the right plan. So we got to smash it up, turn it upside down, put the pieces back together. But that plan, whatever it is, isn't the good enough plan. We need a better plan, just by default. Yeah. Then we have to analyze the people. Like, do you have too many? Can we afford them all? Do you have the right ones? Do we need to change some? Because a good plan and then doing that stuff, you're okay. And then the third thing, which is like a continuous water drop on your head from me, is pace.
Right.
Because if you wish to win, you need to make more decisions that are correct than anybody else in the sector on a daily basis, or you're not going to catch or pass anybody.
Right.
And that demands you be very specific in inputs. How's our IT system? How are we doing in terms of data capture? What are we actually, like, if we're thinking about our North Star key things, what is it by state? And so I'm always happy to look at those 3 things and write a check and get going. But I will drive most people crazy when it comes to the pace thing. No, it's like, guys, like at the end of the day, the worst decision is the deferred decision. And so I'm tough on that. So I was a bit surprised they just said, no, you're fired. We like your money, but get out. But I wouldn't have done it that way. That's their choice. And so, no, that's sort of over. And, obviously, when you put money in, someday you hope to pull it out. And my 4-month hold, I think, was off about starting 6 days ago.
Right. I saw that there was a little bit of selling, and you know what? That's what happens. I mean, it's a business is a business, and you can move on to the next deal.
But I have a secret. If you get a job, a job, and you want to keep it, what we should do is show up and shut up.
Yeah.
But I don't get jobs. I buy part-time work, and so showing up and shut up doesn't work. But the other part is if you want to keep people from selling stock, you got to keep them in a good place with what you're doing. One of the things I really, when I'm looking at companies that I'm putting as a more active filter is, do the founders do the investor relations, and do they see it as one of the 3 most important jobs of every day?
Right.
And I'm not talking about putting a press release out and all that nonsense. I'm talking about, do they have an obligation to communicate, they fulfill? If there's an inbound, do they respond? And if they told the communications team, like media and IR, we get back to same day, every day.
Of course, yeah.
And if you're not doing that, like, what are you waiting? Oh, well, when we have good news, we'll get back to them. You know how that works out? They don't give a shit when you have good news. You got to always get back to them.
Isn't that the truth? I wish more specifically pubcos understood that. Oh, we were talking about a little bit about Europe, and I want to stay on that because obviously you're involved in a deal there in the psychedelic space too, right? You got Redlight over in Amsterdam. That's more on the rec side. I mean, it sounds really fun. What's that play about?
Well, so the reason some people, me, from cannabis went into cannabis is because the public policy was so stupid, and evidently you could see it was going to change.
Right.
And the public policy around psychedelics, in fact, might even be more stupid. The therapeutic potential to deal with people's perception of the circumstance they're in and how they manage their reaction to it is huge with various psychedelics. Now, the question is what dosage, what frequency, blah, blah, blah. So that's the work. But rules in the Netherlands are always weird, right? Like marijuana is not illegal to sell in Netherlands. It's illegal to grow.
Right.
So They can't sell the top of the mushroom in the Netherlands, but they can sell the unfulfilled one, the truffle. And so if someone has a set of rules that permit action, if you think action in other geographies might follow it, go early. Right. And so Redlight Holland simply is using that existing window, and then they're taking it super smart way. Redlight Holland, phenomenal brand. They're going to have great packaging. The product's going to start being available in September. Right. And so one that actually has something that's going to have traction right away. And then you have a couple of choices. Do we start to integrate into the medical supply for psilocybin? Maybe. And or what's going to happen in other places? Because it's not the only place on the planet that didn't make it illegal. Call Jamaica. Check out Brazil. So there's a bunch of places where, you know, people say, well, you know, Bruce, I really think it's terrible that people are going to be having psilocybin. My point out will be exactly as it was with cannabis. Regrettably, I did not invent THC. Yeah. What I did was simply try to be sure that we fulfilled the channel in the most legal and proper way. Exactly. And so if you're fundamentally opposed to people doing what we're doing, then you must only be involved in organized crime, because the net losers out of this are the people who are operating in the shadows as much as they can. We're not in the shadows. We're a public company.
Right, right. And similar to the cannabis sector, you know, early on when we saw that there was 1,000 deals, a lot of them being from Vancouver's, you know, a lot of promoter deals. There's a lot of shit out there right now too. So diligence is crazy. It's,
I would say, the most saddening part of this. And, you know, Redlight started off, I think, in a bit of a promote thing. I came around because the principal running it, Todd Shapiro, is somebody I've known. Well, he was a radio personality. He was one of the funniest people I ever knew. And then I got to know him through other endeavors. I think he's a genuine character who wants to build something. That makes him unique in the promote world. Right. And so he didn't mean to be a promote. He was not knowledgeable about these things, but there's a lot of them. There's a bunch halted, you know, and these guys jumped over early. There's not, the psychedelic space isn't as fast a ride, but it may have a bigger impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you know, it kind of also proves that there's a ton of capital that people are waiting to deploy. There's a ton of investor interest.
Look at MindMed. MindMed is the other extreme of Redlight. MindMed's purpose is to build a platform company. We got research activities from Switzerland to Australia.
You're on the board there.
Yeah, I'm on the board. I was an early investor. And that one is like, it's more like, how do we amend molecules to make it so that we can meet compliance? Or how do we dose things so that we can actually get outcomes, but go against indications that have no current good solutions? Right. And so I think each of them have their very own unique path. But both of them I like, because there's a lot of work to do.
Thanks for making the time, bud. And enjoy that summer-like weather out there. It looks great.
I'm going out. Okay, be good. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.